Well, thank you so much for having me. So, hello, everyone. I am Maureen Murphy. I'm the Executive Programs Manager with Citizens Campaign for the Environment. And Citizens Campaign for the Environment is a not-for-profit grassroots environmental organization, and we work throughout New York and Connecticut. Our headquarter office is here on Long Island in Farmingdale, and we work on a range of issues, everything from renewable energy to reducing pesticides to protecting drinking water, to protecting coastal waters, you name it, we probably work on it. Lately, we've been saying that we work on the 3 W's, wind, water, and waste. So that's a kind of a good summary of all the issues that we touch upon. So tonight, we're really going to talk about climate change and how it's impacting Long Island and what are we doing here on Long Island to transition to renewable energy, and really mainly to invest in offshore wind energy. All right. So now if I could advance my slides. That's odd.
What about the space bar? Will the space bar work?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so climate change, where are we now? This is a great graph that shows temperatures dating back from 1850, and you can see temperatures are on the rise. And in the last 50 years, we've experienced a 2-degree Fahrenheit rise in global temperatures. I mean, if you just think about this week, it's been 65 degrees outside, and we're in November. So unseasonably warm temperatures. And it's predicted that the temperatures will keep on rising. And in order to stop this trend, we really have to decrease our use of fossil fuels. This is a great map. This is put out by NOAA, and you'll see here just the temperatures across the globe. And a lot of times people have moved away from the terminology global warming and to talk about climate change, because there are some areas that aren't warming, they're actually getting cooler. And I read this great book, and Thomas Friedman, he said, we should just start calling it global weirding, because temperatures are just getting weird across the globe. Some places they're getting warm, some places they're getting cooler, but there's definitely changes that are happening. What's going on with my slides? There we go. One of the things that we're seeing across Long Island is, and throughout the nation, is sea level rise. Is the oceans, the estuaries, the bays, we're seeing the waters get higher. And since 1900, we've already seen a 1-foot rise in sea level. And this picture here, I chose this picture, which some people really don't like it, but it's actually a bird's nest. And the bird's nest is submerged in water because we're seeing, you know, the coast and sea level rise happening. We're also seeing these extreme weather events, which we know these here on Long Island, especially being on the South Shore of Long Island. We saw Superstorm Sandy. We saw it just recently where we had mudslides in Manor Haven, and we had, you know, record flooding and rain events in Port Jeff through what's known as Ida. And Ida wasn't a hurricane. Ida wasn't a superstorm. It was actually the remnants of a hurricane. So when it impacted Long Island in ways that we have never seen before. And the pictures that I showed here are pictures that were taken during Sandy. But we're seeing these events more and more frequently. Here's again, these pictures are taken, you know, from the South Shore and Sandy, where many communities were just inundated with water. And you have to remember, Sandy wasn't a rain event. We didn't get that much rain in Superstorm Sandy, but we did get a huge storm surge, and these communities were really underwater. We're also seeing ocean acidification. So I have this picture here of oysters. Here on Long Island, we love our shellfish, right? We love clams, oysters, and mussels even. But with oceans getting more acidic because of the increase in these harmful emissions, the bivalves that we like to eat and the oysters and the clams have trouble producing their shells because the acidic waters are impacting their ability to create these hard shells. Here's a great map on ocean acidification, and you can see how our oceans are just becoming more and more acidic. And that's not good. That's not good news for the oysters and clams. It's not good news for the other sea life. And if you remember, in the last couple of years, we've heard a lot about Patchogue scallops, and the Patchogues are known for their bay scallops. Yet we've saw in the March of 2020, well, actually it wasn't 2020, it was in the fall of 2020 where there was no scallops at all. And then we're seeing that this year again, where there's no scallops at all. And the DEC, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, said the die-off, which decimated the scallop population, is associated with a parasite. And environmental factors linked to climate change were likely an extremely important contributing factor to the die-off of the scallops and the increase of the presence of this parasite. So it stated in the report that parasite-driven mortality is often worsened by a combination of stressors, and some of the environmental factors causing stress on bay scallops in 2019 may have included rapidly increasing water temperatures, sustained high water temperatures, changes in pH, and low dissolved oxygen levels. So these are the local impacts that we're really seeing throughout Long Island, these changes. And here on the South Shore, a phenomenon known as sunny day flooding is increasing. This picture was taken in Mastic Beach, where it's no rain event, there's no storm event, yet the community is flooded. And this is because the sea level is rising. So under the worst case scenario predicted by NOAA, 150 Long Island towns would be impacted by 2100, with most of the barrier islands and homes south of Merrick Road flooded or underwater. So you can see, all of these communities, including the community of Patchogue, really impacted by climate change. This is just a 35-year trend of summer water temperatures through July through September. And you can see summer water temperatures are increasing. So what does this mean? I mean, it means, warmer waters for swimming, but what about the species that depend on our waters? And there has been a shift. We're not seeing as many cold water dependent species like our lobsters, which used to be thriving in Long Island Sound, but lobster is a cold water species. And the waters in Long Island Sound have been very warm, so the lobsters cannot survive. We're also seeing, an increase in like summer flounder, because summer flounder likes warmer waters. So we're seeing more summer flounder, less, winter flounder, less lobster, other cold water species. We've also seen an increase in invasive species, such as the sea squirt and the Asian shrimp. So these are not native to Long Island, to waters around Long Island, yet they end up in the waters and they end up thriving in the waters because of the warmer waters. So let's just shift here a little bit. So that's kind of the overall picture of how climate change impacts us here on Long Island. And it does impact because we are surrounded by water, right? We are an island. So let's just shift for a little bit and talk about where we get our power from, because this is really important. Because to fight climate change, we have to change the way we produce energy. So how are we producing energy here on Long Island? I'm glad you asked. We have 3 legacy fossil fuel plants. We have the Northport Power Plant, the Port Jeff Power Plant, and the Island Park Power Plant. And they provide 40% of our generation capacity for electricity. So these are, again, old fossil fuel clunkers, we call them. Increased energy efficiency and renewable energy, including solar. We have invested in large scale solar projects, particularly, on the East End and Riverhead. Rooftop solar, there's been a huge increase in the amount of rooftop solar that Long Island homes have invested in. So they now provide 22% of Long Island's energy. And then we've also, worked to build updated, we call them updated power plants. They're still fossil fuel power plants, but they're much more efficient than the old clunkers that we built so long ago. And we have, Caithness and Yaphank, and then we have these 30 additional fossil fuel peaker plants. And these peaker plants are small fossil fuel or oil-based plants that only get turned on when needed. And usually that's in the summer months when we're all running our air conditioners. So as you can see, we are heavily dependent on fossil fuels, on oil and gas electricity. We do have a few cables as well, connecting us to New Jersey, connecting us to Connecticut, that we import energy into Long Island and use those cables. But if we're going to fight climate change here on Long Island, we need to transition away from these fossil fuels. We need to embrace renewable energy, particularly offshore wind and solar. And, because we are so developed here on Long Island, having onshore land-based wind energy is really not feasible. There really is no place to site them. We have, put land-based wind farms in upstate New York, where there's a lot of farms, and the farmers actually, they love having wind farms on their property because they get the money from the wind farm, but they also still get to keep farming. And, a lot of times they'll give local tours as well. People are very interested to see these, to see the wind turbines, and, the farmers are happy to provide tours for these people. But here on Long Island, we need to look off our coast. So we have a great wind resource off our coast. So we need to embrace offshore wind. This is just a picture I put in here because some people, they say, well, we don't want offshore wind because we don't want to look at it. Well, this is what we currently look at. This is on our shores. This is the Northport Power Plant. It's right on the water there. It's, visible from any place you go in Northport. It's visible from the water. It's visible from the beach. It's visible from the harbor. So this is what we already have, and this is what we're already looking at. So, I mean, if you ask me, I think, offshore wind turbines are like kinetic art, but we'll talk about it. They've moved farther offshore, so they're not going to be right here on the coast either. I included this picture because there's Al Gore, and New York State has made a huge amount of progress in making large scale commitments to, fight climate change, particularly in the last 4 years. The states have been really stepping up to do more in the states since we pulled out of the Paris Accord. On a national level, we pulled away from the Paris Accord, which set up standards for us to start reducing fossil fuels and embracing more renewable energies. So the states have been stepping up. And in 2019, New York passed the most ambitious climate change law in the country. It was signed in 2019. It says that we need to get to 70% renewable energy by 2030. And we need to have all of our electricity be carbon free by 2040. It also states in that legislation, we need to develop 9,000 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035 and 6,000 megawatts of solar by 2025. So these are big, ambitious goals. And yes, we can do that. We can meet these goals. We can rise up to this challenge, but we have to start now. So let's just, talk a little bit about global offshore wind. This is not a new technology. This has been around for a long time. In fact, the first offshore wind farm began operating in Denmark in 1991. And other countries that have offshore wind include countries like Belgium, China, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Ireland, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, United Kingdom. So this is being done all over the world. As of 2019, European offshore wind farms generated nearly 205 megawatts of renewable energy, or approximately 14% of the EU's power. So this is kind of fun. This was featured on CBS in the morning, where I clipped it from. And this is, Europe. Europe has, this is all offshore wind farms. So they have 24,837 megawatts of offshore wind. China has 9,996 megawatts of offshore wind. Not really known for their progressive energy policies, but they have embraced offshore wind. This is just one of the pictures off of China where you can see the wind farms they keep going. United States, we have 42 megawatts, not 42,000, not 420, 42. Let's just, in case you missed that, Europe has 24,000. China has 9,000, and the United States has 42. These 42 megawatts can be found in only 2 offshore wind farms. And honestly, it's really just this one offshore wind farm, which is off of Rhode Island. This powers Block Island. And then these 2 wind turbines are a test pilot project off of Virginia. That is the only offshore wind we have in the United States. We are clearly falling behind the curve. This is the Block Island wind farm. It is 5 turbines off of Block Island. Block Island, this is pretty close to the coast. This wind farm was actually built within state waters, which made permitting easier for the wind farm. And Block Island was so excited to have this wind farm built because that island was powered by dirty diesel, old, yuck, gross fossil fuel technology. And they're able now to, stop using the diesel technology, stop using those fossil fuel plants, and they're powered by this offshore wind farm. I've actually been to Block Island. I've toured the island. I've toured the wind farm. I've spoken to a lot of the business owners and the residents there who have just, so happy that this has been built and they have been able to transition away from those diesel plants. And there's lots of benefits to offshore wind, and for us as a state. So 9,000 megawatts will power 6 million homes and provide 30% of New York's electricity. They'll create 10,000 local jobs, and these are jobs in manufacturing, installation, and operations. And of course, each project will be required to undergo an in-depth environmental review process, including opportunities for members of the public to comment. Okay, so now this is a fun map. So those, the climate change legislation set up lots of goals for New York. New York has embraced this and said, we want to go down this path. We want to embrace, clean, renewable energy. And we're not just talking about it. We're not just planning about it. We are doing it. And that's what this graphic shows. So these are the current offshore wind farms that are going through the permitting process. New York State, put out solicitation and said, we want to do offshore wind, give us your projects. Lots of companies submitted projects. These are the projects that have been picked by New York State. So we're just going to go through them, but you can see there's a tiny one here. This is the South Fork Wind Farm, and that will power the east end of Long Island. Then you have the Sunrise Wind Farm, and these projects are way off of the horizon. They're over the horizon. Actually, you won't be able to see them at all. They won't be visible from Long Island at all. And then all the way out here is the Beacon Wind Project, which, the power will go to Long Island. And then you have Empire Wind 1 and Empire Wind 2, which will feed both into New York City and Long Island. So I'll just go through a little bit more about these projects. So the South Fork Wind Farm was actually chosen in 2016. And this one is really kind of fun. It's the smallest of all the projects, and it's the furthest project along in the process. But this project actually went against new fossil fuel infrastructure. So LIPA had identified that they had a need on the South Fork they needed more energy. They didn't have enough energy to meet the future demand on the South Fork. So they put out a solicitation, and a lot of people submitted bids, and mostly they submitted bids to build new fossil fuel plants. This was the only bid to build an offshore wind farm, and LIPA chose the offshore wind farm. And so that was the first time that offshore wind actually competed against fossil fuel and won. And they won because it was cost effective, because it was going to fulfill the need and invest in clean energy. Okay, so this just kind of goes through the other. Then, in 2019, so New York, actually, they set up 2 rounds of bids for offshore wind projects. One was in 2019 and one was in 2021. So in 2019, they chose the Sunrise Wind and the Empire Wind, which will generate 1,700 megawatts of energy and power over 1 million homes. And then in 2021, they chose the Empire Wind 2 and Beacon Wind projects, which will generate power for 1.3 million homes. And then, I just broke them out a little bit more so you can see that the Sunrise Wind, that's the one, way out here off of Montauk, and that's 880 megawatts. It hopefully will be fully operational by 2024. It's 30 miles off the coast of Montauk, so it's pretty far out. Empire Wind is off of the south shore of Long Island. You can see there, that's the lease area. It's 800 megawatts as well, 500,000 homes, and it'll be 14 miles off the coast of Long Beach. Beacon Wind is all the way off of Montauk, and this will be 1,230 megawatts. And then I guess I didn't put in Empire Wind 2, but Empire Wind 1 and 2 are located in pretty much the same area. They're right next to each other. Okay. So I'm just gonna pause there for a moment because and tell you that, here at CCE, we're really excited to see offshore wind projects move forward. And we've created what's known as the WindWorks Long Island Coalition. And it's a coalition of many, many groups. Here's a bunch of groups that are part of the coalition here. But we also have a website, the windworkslongisland.org website. And that website gives you a lot of information about the offshore wind projects. It also, keeps you up to date on upcoming meetings, opportunities to comment. There's, information on the projects there. There's also information on potential impacts and mitigation measures, which I can go through some of them here, some of the top ones that we get. I just put in a couple of slides because people always say, well, offshore wind, that sounds great, but what about the birds? What about the birds? So honestly, the biggest impact to birds is climate change. But besides that, there's been some great studies over in Europe, and this probably looks crazy to you, right? This crazy graphic here. Why'd she put this crazy graphic up here? But this is done in Europe, and you can see all of these red dots, and these red dots represent wind turbines in the water. And all of these gray lines here, these all represent bird paths. So it's like a bird flying through. And what you can see and what kind of jumps out you is birds can see and they fly around the turbines. And you can see very little paths that go between turbines. Mostly the birds will fly entirely around the offshore wind turbines. So another, myth that we hear a lot is like, well, I heard, these blades, they go so fast and they just chop up the birds. Nope, that's not true. That's a myth. And actually, where that comes from is the land-based wind turbines. When they first started building the land-based turbines, they built them with these foundations that were lattice foundations. And so they were built and they had, if you can think of a ladder, that's what these foundations look like. And of course, the ladder foundations were not good for birds because it was a perfect area for these birds to make their nests on, in the foundation there. And there was bird deaths. That's no longer the case. They don't put lattice foundations anymore. And especially in the ocean, you usually see a monopole or a much sleeker design. So birds are not nesting, on the wind turbines themselves. In 2014, the National Audubon Society conducted a study assessing climate change impacts to North America's birds. The study found that 314 of 588 species would lose more than half their 2010 geographic range by 2080 due to climate change. Among the most affected birds are the bald eagle, the osprey, and the piping plover. Additionally, the sea level rise threatens sea turtles and shorebirds habitat. So offshore wind mitigates the impacts of climate change. Whales, people ask all the time, okay, well, we've been seeing a lot of whales off Long Island shores. We've seen an increase in the whales, an increase in the whale species, including humpback whales, fin whales, blue whales. They've tracked blue whales, which is the largest whale on the globe, close to the Statue of Liberty. And we have right whales, which are very endangered. The North Atlantic right whale is a very endangered whale. We have these all migrating off the coast of New York and the Atlantic Ocean. So what are we doing to protect whales? Well, if we look at the Block Island Wind Farm, there was a construction agreement that contained an important commitment by the wind developer to shut down construction operations if marine mammals were spotted in the vicinity. And then in 2019, we saw a wind farm that's moving forward in Massachusetts, Vineyard Wind, which also signed an agreement. And these agreements were signed with environmental groups that specialize in the protection of the Atlantic right whale and specialize in protections for whale species. In 2019, the Vineyard Winds signed an agreement which curtailed construction during active migration of the endangered right whale, put limits on the speed of any vessels in the area, and put rigorous monitoring measures in place to protect marine mammals. So what can you do? We like to say, show up, stand up, and speak up, the 3 S's. But really, we need everybody's voice, because a lot of times, when people are supportive of things, they're like, oh, well, that's fine. And they don't show up. They don't speak up. They don't write a letter. They don't, come to a public hearing because they just saying, okay, that's fine. It sounds good to me. But then what happens is the people that are dissatisfied or that don't want, offshore wind to proceed, or those are the voices that get heard. And we want to make sure that the supportive voices are heard. We've done a lot of polling on this, and we've done a lot of presentations throughout Long Island, on the North Shore, on the South Shore, in the Middle Island, you know, and people support offshore wind. They want us to move away from fossil fuels, and they want us to embrace clean energy. So we always say, but we have to make your voice heard. So please follow us on social media. Every Wednesday we call it the Wednesdays, and we have all facts on offshore wind and educational articles. We have the WindWorks Long Island webpage, which is up and running, which has a lot of great information on there, and lots of opportunities for people to get involved and to have their voice heard. And those are my slides. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. And I'll just say too, I'll end here by saying all energy infrastructure has an impact. We want to choose the energy infrastructure with the least impact, not the most impact. So no energy infrastructure is perfect. And we don't think that offshore wind is perfect. But the biggest threat to us is climate change, and we have to mitigate climate change. That has to be our priority. And to do that, we're going to have to invest in clean energy. So thank you for having me here tonight. I'm happy to take questions. I'm glad, everybody was able to join in. So thank you.